The silence was the first thing you noticed. Not the empty silence of a quiet room, but a deep, resonant silence that filled the void between stars. It was a silence with weight, with pressure. On the bridge of the Deep Space Monitoring Station Whisper 7, it was a silence that pressed down on your eardrums until they ached for the faintest crackle of static, the hum of a distant pulsar, anything. He sat at his console, the glow of the star chart the only light etching the lines of his face. He'd been a technician for a long time. Long enough to remember the sounds of a busy universe. Long enough to remember the war. That's what they called it, anyway. The war was a series of desperate, losing battles against an enemy we never truly saw. The Xylos Collective. They didn't send threats or declarations. They just arrived, and systems went dark. Colonies, outposts, whole fleets, vanished. Not destroyed in fiery explosions, but silenced. Erased. The comms would fill with frantic, terrified voices, and then, nothing. That same, heavy nothing that now filled the universe. He rubbed his tired eyes. His shift had ended 6 hours ago, but where was there to go? His quarters were just another small, metal room waiting to be swallowed by the quiet. So he stayed, watching the empty green grids on his screen, a digital monument to all we had lost. He was looking at a graveyard, and the headstones were the names of stars we could no longer reach. A soft chime broke the silence. It was so alien, so unexpected, that at first he thought it was a phantom sound, a trick his sleep-deprived mind was playing. But then it chimed again. A proximity alert. But that was impossible. The nearest human vessel was the Odysseus, 3 light-years away on patrol. And the Xylos didn't trigger alerts. They just were. His heart, a sluggish muscle he'd almost forgotten about, began to thud against his ribs. He leaned forward, his fingers flying across the console, pulling up the data. Stream. It wasn't a ship. The signature was wrong. It was bigger. Much, much bigger. And it was drifting, not under power. A ghost. The identification code flickered onto the screen, and the breath caught in his throat. It was impossible. It was a myth. A ghost story spacers told each other over recycled water and protein paste. USS Blackstar. Every child knew the name. They knew it the way ancient civilizations knew the names of forgotten gods. The Blackstar wasn't a ship, it was a last resort. A legend born from our darkest hour, a decade ago. When the Xylos Armada had broken through the Seraphim line and was headed straight for Earth, the stories said we built something. Not a warship, not really. They called it a cosmic deterrent. A weapon so terrible, so final, that its very existence was meant to be a message. But the message was never sent. The Blackstar was launched on its shakedown cruise and disappeared. Vanished just like the colonies. We assumed the Xylos had found it first. We'd mourned it as the final nail in our coffin, the last hope that flickered and died. And now, here it was. Drifting right on the edge of the Scutum Centaurus arm, a stone's throw from the graveyard of the Third Fleet. He opened a comms channel, his voice a dry croak. Whisper 7 to command. Priority Alpha. I have a visual on a drifting vessel. Transmitting transponder code now. The response from command was instant, the voice on the other end sharp with a tension he'd never heard before. Whisper 7, confirm that transmission. Confirm the code. I'm confirming it, command. It's the Blackstar. The silence that followed was louder than any he had ever experienced. He could almost hear the panic, the disbelief, a billion miles away on Earth. Then, new data scrolled across his screen. Command was feeding him everything. Long-range optical scans resolved the image. And there she was. A sleek, obsidian dagger against the tapestry of stars. She showed no lights. No engine signatures. No life signs. She was a tomb. But she was intact. Not a scratch on her. Whisper 7, the science vessel Einstein is 8 hours out. You are to maintain position. Observe and report. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to hail. No active scans. Passive only. He nodded, though no one could see. Understood. Passive only. For 8 hours, he watched the ghost. He thought about the crew. What happened to them? Did they just go to sleep? Did they run into something even the Blackstar couldn't handle? The official line from command crackled over the secure channel. They talked about a recovery mission. About bringing a lost national treasure home. But he could hear the lie in their voices. This wasn't about recovery. This was about fear. They were terrified of the thing they had built. Then, the Einstein arrived. He watched on the sensor feed as the small, nimble science vessel cautiously approached the monolithic Blackstar. He saw the tiny pinpricks of light as EVA teams jetted across the void, landing on the derelict's hull. He listened to their comms chatter, their voices hushed with awe and fear. Borden, team to Einstein. We found an airlock. It's operational. Cycling now. A pause that felt like an eternity. Einstein, we're inside. Atmosphere is stale, but breathable. No power. Emergency lighting only. Proceeding to the bridge. He found himself holding his breath, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his console. He was listening to a team walking into the belly of a god, and he had a terrible, cold feeling in his gut that they were about to wake it up. Then, a new voice came over the channel. One of the boarders. His voice was trembling, not with fear, but with something else. Awe. Einstein, you're not going to believe this. The main weapon system, it's not offline. The channel from command went dead quiet. The boarder continued, his voice a whisper of disbelief. It's armed. The system is fully powered. It's been armed this whole time. And the targeting computer. It's locked. It has a target. On the Whisper 7, the technician felt the blood drain from his face. A target, he muttered to the empty room. What target? There's nothing out there. And then, his own long-range sensors, set to passive scan the area the Blackstar was pointing towards, pinged with a new alert. Something was on the edge of their detection range, something massive. Something that was moving. Not drifting. Moving with purpose. The Xylos. They were coming. And the Blackstar, our silent, sleeping god of death, had been pointing right at them for 10 long years. It hadn't been drifting. It had been waiting. The question was, who was it waiting for? Them? Or us? And as the first Xylos vessels began to spill into real space, a single, horrifying thought echoed in his mind. The Blackstar was about to break its silence. And whatever testament it was about to give, would be written in the silence it left behind. The ping from the long-range sensor was no longer a single note. It had become a chorus, a screaming, digital avalanche of data flooding his screen. The technician on Whisper 7 watched, paralyzed, as the ghostly signature solidified. They weren't just ships. It was a swarm. A locust cloud of angular, unnatural shapes bleeding into reality, their numbers so vast they distorted the sensor grid itself. The Xylos. They were here. Not a scouting party, but the main armada, the very same force that had shattered the Seraphim line. And they were heading right for the heart of what was left of human space. On the bridge of the science vessel Einstein, the calm, academic atmosphere shattered. Alarms blared, red light painting the faces of the crew in strokes of panic. Confirm that contact. Gods, the size of it. The captain of the Einstein barked, her voice straining to stay level. The technician on Whisper 7 listened to the frantic crosstalk. His own station feeling impossibly small and fragile. He was a spectator to the end of everything, watching from the cheapest seat in the house. Then, a new voice cut through the chaos on the command channel. It was the lead boarder, still inside the Blackstar. His voice had lost its awe. Now it was raw, sharp with a fear that was bone deep. Einstein command, we're reading it too. But, the Blackstar is reacting. The power levels, they're climbing. Not slowly. It's like a heartbeat. A waking heartbeat. A different voice, crackling with the authority of Earth Command, intervened. Borden, team, get out of there. Now. That's an order. Evacuate the Blackstar. We can't, the boarder shouted back, the sound of clanging metal echoing behind him. The airlocks. They've sealed. We're trapped in here. A cold dread, colder than the void outside, seeped into the technician on Whisper 7. The Blackstar wasn't just a weapon, it was a predator. And it had just closed its jaws around the only people who knew it was awake. The captain of the Einstein was trying a different tack. Borden, team, can you access the bridge? The command console. Maybe you can shut it down from the source. A moment of static, then the boarder's voice returned, breathless. We're on the bridge now. It's not what you think. There's no one here. The crew, their stations are empty. But it's clean. No signs of a struggle. It's like they just stepped out for a moment 10 years ago. He continued, his words tumbling out. The main console is active. The weapon system interface, it's not in any language I know. It's all symbols. Cosmic radiation patterns, gravitational wave schematics, it's targeting the Xylos Armada, but it's not just targeting their ships. It's targeting the space they're in. It's like it's planning to unweave the very fabric of reality they're occupying. The concept was so vast, so horrifying. It silenced the command channel for a moment. This wasn't a missile or a laser. This was something else entirely. A one-shot weapon meant not just to destroy, but to erase. The boarder's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. There's a log entry. The last one. Dated the day they vanished. It's from the ship's commander. She just says, the calculus is complete. The silence is the only moral choice. God forgive us. The silence is the only moral choice. The words hung in the void, more terrifying than any declaration of war. What had the crew of the Blackstar discovered 10 years ago? What was so horrible that utter annihilation was the moral option? Did they see a future so dark that this absolute weapon was the only light? The Xylos Armada continued its advance, oblivious or unconcerned by the tiny human vessels and the dark dagger floating near them. Their course was unwavering. Towards Earth. Towards the end. Then, the Blackstar's power signature spiked again. This time, it wasn't a heartbeat. It was a surge. A wave of energy that washed over the Einstein and Whisper 7, making their lights flicker and their instruments scream. Einstein to Borden, team. Report. What's happening? The boarder's voice was choked with static. It's building to a peak. The symbols on the screen, they're resolving. It's almost ready to fire. Can you stop it? Command demanded, desperation clawing at the edge of their transmission. We're trying. Nothing works. The console doesn't respond to input. It's like the ship has a mind of its own. It's made its decision. On the Whisper 7, the technician watched a new data stream appear on his screen. It was a feed from the Blackstar's own external sensors, somehow patching into his system. He was now seeing what the ghost ship saw. The Xylos Armada, in all its terrifying glory, filled the display. And superimposed over it were intricate, glowing lines of force. A targeting solution of unimaginable complexity. It was a sight no human was ever meant to see. He saw something else, too. A small, almost insignificant data packet attached to the feed. A message, time-stamped 10 years ago, addressed to any monitoring station with the right clearance. His station, by some forgotten protocol, had the clearance. His fingers trembling, he opened it. It wasn't a long message. It was a video file. The face that filled his screen was pale, her eyes shadowed by a weight that seemed to crush her from the inside. The commander of the Blackstar. Her uniform was pristine, but her expression was one of utter desolation. To whoever finds this, she began, her voice eerily calm. If you are seeing this, then the Blackstar has detected the conditions for which it was programmed. The Xylos are not an invasion force. They are a cosmic infection. A pattern of existence that consumes and converts all other patterns. They don't just kill life, they rewrite it. Absorb it. There is no negotiation. No surrender. Only assimilation. She took a shaky breath. We discovered this too late. Our first, and only, test fire was on a Xylos scout vessel. We didn't just destroy it. We nullified it. We erased its pattern from reality. But we felt it. Every mind on this ship felt the echo of that, uncreation. It is a violation of existence itself. To use this weapon is to become a monster. But to not use it, is to allow the death of everything that ever was or could be. So we made a choice. We set the weapon to auto-fire, triggered by the arrival of their main fleet. And then we left. We took the shuttles and set a course for the void. A final penance. We could not bear to be here when it happened. The silence after will be our testament. And our condemnation. The video ended. The technician sat in his chair, the commander's words echoing in his mind. The crew hadn't vanished. They had exiled themselves. They had chosen a slow death in the empty dark over witnessing the horrifying miracle they had unleashed. He looked back at the sensor display. The Blackstar was now glowing from within, a faint, terrible light bleeding from its obsidian hull. The Xylos Armada was almost in range. And he was the only one who knew the truth. He knew that the weapon was about to fire. He knew why. And he knew that the brave souls trapped on board were about to witness a horror that had driven an entire crew to suicide by deep space. He opened a channel, his voice a broken thing. Command, whisper, 7. I have information. About the Blackstar's crew. About what this weapon truly does. But as he spoke, he saw the Einstein suddenly lurch on his screen. Its engines flared to life, not to flee, but to move. It was positioning itself, a tiny, fragile shield, directly between the waking Blackstar and the boarding team's trapped shuttle, still attached to the giant ship's hull. The captain's voice came through, clear and steady now, all fear gone. Command, we are not abandoning our people. Whatever happens next, we face it together. The Blackstar's light intensified, burning like a cold, new star. The final sequence had begun. And there was nothing anyone could do but watch. The light from the Blackstar wasn't a light you could look at. It was a feeling, a pressure against the mind. On the whisper, 7, the technician could feel it through the hull, a low thrum that vibrated in his teeth. The ship was no longer a dormant relic, it was a living heart, pumping energy he couldn't begin to understand. The scream of his sensors was a single, continuous note of terror. The Xylos Armada was a blot, a cancer spreading across the star chart, silent and inevitable. Inside the Blackstar, the boarding team huddled near a viewport, their faces bathed in the eerie, internal glow. The leader, his hand pressed against the cold, transparent alloy, spoke into his comms. His voice thin and stretched. Einstein *, get out of here. That's an order. You can't do anything for us. The captain of the Einstein responded, her voice tight with a defiance that felt like a prayer. We're not leaving you. We're creating a dampening field, trying to disrupt the energy buildup. It's a long shot, but it's all we have. It was a futile gesture, a pebble thrown at a tidal wave, but it was human. It was the exact opposite of the Blackstar's cold, logical calculus. It was the choice to stand with your people, even in the face of the unthinkable. The technician on Whisper 7 listened, the commander's confession burning in his ears. He had to tell them. They had to know what they were facing. He opened a channel, overriding the panic, forcing his voice to be heard. Captain Einstein. The crew of the Blackstar, they didn't vanish. They abandoned ship. They left because of what the weapon does. It doesn't just destroy. It unmakes. It erases things from existence. They called it a violation. They couldn't bear to be here when it fired. A stunned silence greeted his words. He could imagine the faces on the Einstein's bridge, the dawning horror as the concept took root. Erasure. Not death, but something far worse. A negation. On the Blackstar, the boarder understood first. A violation. He whispered, looking at the complex, alien symbols still dancing on the main console. That's what this feeling is. It's not power. It's emptiness. It's hungry. Suddenly, the symbols on the console shifted. The complex targeting schematics dissolved, replaced by a single, blinking human word, stark and simple against the cosmic patterns. Abort? The boarder stared, unable to process it. Command, Einstein, the system. It's asking us a question. It's giving us a choice. It says, abort. For a heartbeat, every channel was dead. The implication was staggering. The weapon, the ultimate machine, the final judge, had presented them with its moral calculus. It had done the math, and the answer was not a command, but a question. The voice from Earth Command was sharp, laced with a desperate hope. Do it. Boarding team, abort the firing sequence. That's a direct order. The boarder's hand hovered over the console. But he didn't touch it. He looked at his team, seeing his own fear and doubt reflected in their eyes. He looked out the viewport at the Einstein, a tiny, brave shield. And he looked at the sensor display, which showed the leading edge of the Xylos Armada beginning to launch smaller, faster vessels. Scouts. Headed right for them. If we abort, the boarder said, his voice trembling, what stops them? The Einstein can't fight them off. Nothing can. They'll absorb us, and then they'll head for Earth. Billions of lives. The technician on Whisper 7 watched the scout ships approach. He saw the data. Their energy signatures were identical to the ones that had wiped out the colonies. Cold, consuming. The commander's words echoed, a cosmic infection. It was an impossible choice. Become monsters by unleashing a horror that violated the laws of existence, or become martyrs to an extinction that would rewrite humanity into something unrecognizable. The Blackstar seemed to sense their hesitation. The word on the screen changed. Abort, Y/N. T-00:01:00. A clock. 1 minute. The thrumming energy within the ship intensified, the light growing so bright it cast sharp, black shadows inside the bridge. The ship was a coiled spring, ready to unleash its silent testament. The captain of the Einstein made the call. Boarding team, this is your decision. You are on the scene. You have the facts. We will support you, whatever you choose. But choose quickly. The weight of worlds settled onto the shoulders of the few souls trapped inside the ghost ship. The boarder looked at his team, at the man and woman who had followed him into this tomb. A vote. He said, his voice cracking. All in favor of aborting, show me. One of them, a young woman with wide, terrified eyes, slowly raised her hand. Then, after an agonizing pause, she lowered it. I can't, she whispered. I saw the data from Whisper 7. My my family is on Earth. The other member just shook his head, mute with fear. The boarder looked at his own hands. He thought of the Blackstar's commander, choosing exile over witnessing her own terrible act. He wasn't that strong. But was he strong enough to press the button that would essentially kill a part of the universe? T-00:00:30. The Xylos scouts were closer now. They would be in weapons range in seconds. The Einstein shifted its position, its shields flaring to maximum. A final, defiant act. On the console, the Y and N glowed, waiting. The ultimate yes or no question. Yes, save our souls and doom our future. No, sacrifice our humanity to save it. The boarder took a deep, shuddering breath. He reached out, his finger hovering over the console. The fate of two civilizations balanced on a single touch. He made his choice. His finger trembled, a hair's breadth from the console. The glowing Y for yes seemed to pulse, promising salvation, promising that they wouldn't have to become the monsters the original crew fled from. He could almost feel the relief, the release of the terrible energy building around them. But his eyes were locked on the sensor display. The Xylos scouts were like blades slicing through the dark, silent and deadly. To abort was to die. It was to let that silence consume everything. He moved his finger. Not to Y, but to N. A single, decisive tap. For a second, nothing happened. The countdown continued. T-00:00:05. Then, a new message flashed on the screen, not in the cold symbols, but in the same simple text. Confirmation, first strike protocol engaged. Final authorization required, ****. A wave of cold dread washed over him. Final authorization. What did that mean? They had just chosen to fire. What more did the ship want? A new interface materialized on the console. It wasn't a button this time. It was a biometric scanner. A handprint reader. It needs a handprint, he yelled into the comms, his voice cracking with desperation. It needs a command-level authorization. We don't have that. T-00:00:03. On the Einstein, the captain watched, her heart hammering. The original commander. Is there a body? Anything? On the Blackstar, the team looked around frantically. The bridge was pristine, empty. There was no one. T-00:00:02. The Xylos scouts opened fire. Not with lasers or projectiles, but with a beam of twisting, corrosive energy that slammed into the Einstein's shields. The science vessel shuddered violently, alarms screeching. The shield integrity plummeted. They wouldn't survive a second hit. It was over. They had chosen to fire, and the weapon had demanded a price they couldn't pay. They were going to die here, helpless, watching their last hope die with them. T-00:00:01. The technician on the Whisper 7 saw it first. A small, secondary data packet that had piggybacked on the commander's video message. It was labeled simply, Key. His fingers, moving on pure instinct, flew across his console. He couldn't send help. He couldn't send weapons. But he could send data. He routed the packet, screaming it across the void on every frequency he could access, directly to the Blackstar's comm system. On the Blackstar's bridge, a console lit up. The biometric scanner glowed, and a complex pattern, a digital ghost of a handprint, superimposed itself over the reader. The boarder didn't hesitate. He slammed his own hand down onto the scanner. A voice, calm and pre-recorded, filled the bridge. It was the commander's voice, but stripped of all emotion. It was the voice of the ship itself. Authorization confirmed. Final command accepted. The burden is yours now. The countdown hit 0. But the Blackstar didn't fire. Instead, the thrumming energy that had been building to an unbearable peak suddenly reversed. It didn't vanish, it inverted. It felt like the entire ship was taking a deep, final breath, sucking all the sound and light out of the universe. The viewports went black. The console lights died. For a moment, there was only absolute silence and absolute darkness. It was the silence the first commander had spoken of. It was heavier than anything they could have imagined. Then, the main viewport flickered back to life. But it wasn't showing the stars anymore. It was showing a schematic of the local space, with the Blackstar at the center. A wave of distortion, visible only to the ship's sensors, began to pulse outward from its hull. It was slow, almost gentle. It wasn't an explosion. It was an unraveling. The wave touched the first Xylo's scout. The scout didn't explode. It came apart. Not into pieces, but into strands of light and data, like a thread being pulled from a tapestry. For a split second, the intricate, horrifying pattern of the Xylo's vessel was visible, a complex and alien beauty, and then it simply smoothed over. It was gone. Not destroyed. Edited out. The space where it had been was just space. Empty. Clean. The wave moved on, towards the next scout, and the next, a silent, expanding circle of nothingness. The boarder watched, his hand still pressed against the scanner, frozen in place. He had given the order. He had authorized the first strike. But this wasn't a victory. It was an autopsy. They weren't witnessing a battle, they were witnessing a deletion. The Xylo's armada, the great, terrifying swarm, didn't even seem to notice. The wave reached the edge of the main fleet, and ships began to vanish from the periphery inward, silently and without a fight. He had thought the choice was between being a monster or a martyr. He was wrong. He had become something else entirely. A janitor of the cosmos, cleaning up a mess with a tool so terrible that using it stained the soul. The first strike wasn't an attack. It was a correction. And as he watched the silent, peaceful wave of uncreation sweep towards the heart of the armada, he understood the true weight of their silent testament. They hadn't just saved humanity. They had rewritten history. And they were the only ones who would ever know what they had erased. The wave of silence moved out from the Blackstar like the slow, inevitable unclenching of a fist. There was no sound. No flash of light. That was the most horrifying part. The Xylo's ships didn't scream or resist. They simply ceased. One moment they were there, angular and menacing, a civilization of unimaginable age and power. The next, there was only the empty black of space. It was as if a god had taken an eraser to the universe and wiped them away. On the bridge of the Blackstar, the boarding team watched, unable to speak, unable to breathe. They were not heroes witnessing a victory. They were witnesses to a crime against reality itself. The boarder could still feel the cold imprint of the scanner on his palm, a brand. He had given the final command. This was his doing. The wave reached the heart of the armada. The largest ship, a monstrous structure that looked like a twisted galaxy, began to unravel. It didn't explode. It dissolved, its complex patterns of light and matter flowing apart like sand in a tide, leaving nothing behind. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It was the silence of a grave for trillions. Then, it was over. The Blackstar's internal lights flickered back on, soft and normal. The terrible energy was gone. The viewports showed only stars. The same stars that had been there before, but now they looked different. They looked alone. A single, green word appeared on the main console. Objective, achieved. System standby, ***. The boarder finally pulled his hand back, his whole body trembling. He looked at his crew. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with a shared trauma. They had survived. Everyone had survived. The Einstein drifted nearby, its shields down, miraculously untouched by the wave of nullification. It had passed over them like a ghost. A channel crackled open. It was the captain of the Einstein, her voice a husk of what it once was. What did we just do? Before anyone could answer, a new alert chimed softly on the Blackstar's console. It was a priority message, routed through the whisper, 7. The technician's voice was shaky, but clear. Blackstar Einstein. I'm reading something. A new signal. It's coming from the Blackstar itself. A data burst, aimed at a set of deep space coordinates. It just transmitted. The boarder felt a fresh jolt of ice in his veins. Transmitted what? I don't know. It's encrypted. But the destination, it's not anywhere in human space. It's a point way out in the intergalactic void. A cold realization settled over him. The weapon had done its job. But the ship wasn't finished. The commander's final log entry echoed in his mind, *, the calculus is complete. *. He turned back to the console, his fingers flying across the surface, accessing the ship's core logs. The original crew had left more than just a confession. They had left a record of their calculus. He pulled it up. It wasn't a military report. It was a scientific one. A cosmological study. The Blackstar hadn't just been a weapon. It had been an instrument. The logs showed that during its first, horrific test fire, the ship hadn't just erased the Xylos scout. It had studied the process. It had measured the exact nature of the infection. And it had made a discovery. The boarder read, his blood running cold. The Xylos weren't the source. They were a symptom. A pattern of consumption that had originated from somewhere else. From a location the logs simply called the source. The Xylos were just the first wave, the leading edge of a phenomenon that was slowly, inevitably, rewriting the entire universe into a state of silent, uniform nothingness. The Blackstar had analyzed the Xylos pattern and traced it back to its origin. The final entry in the log was new. It was time-stamped just moments ago. Threat pattern nullified. Data on source of Xylos pattern collected and analyzed. Coordinates for source location confirmed. Mission parameters updated, ***. The boarder stared, understanding dawning with a terrible, crushing weight. The fight with the Xylos Armada hadn't been the war. It had been the first battle. The first strike. The main console lit up again. A new schematic appeared. It was a star chart, but it showed a path leading far beyond the Milky Way, into the unimaginable emptiness between galaxies. A path to the source. The ship's engines, silent for a decade, began to power up with a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the deck plates. The voice of the Einstein's captain broke the silence. Blackstar what is happening? Your engines are activating. The boarder looked at his team, then out the viewport at the fragile, beautiful speck of the Einstein. They had thought they were making an impossible choice to save their home. They had only been signing up for a much longer, much darker journey. The real enemy wasn't in front of them anymore. It was waiting. And the Blackstar, their terrible, silent angel of death, was now their only ride to the true front lines. He keyed the comms, his voice steady now, emptied of everything except a grim, final purpose. Einstein this is Blackstar. The Armada was just a warning shot. The real war, it's just beginning. Tell command, tell them the Blackstar is going dark. We have a new mission. On the console, the words objective, achieved faded away, replaced by two new words that glowed with a cold. Final light. Next target, locked. The hum of the engines grew louder. The stars outside began to streak. The USS Blackstar, with its new, unwilling crew, turned towards the deep black and jumped, leaving behind a saved, but terrifyingly ignorant, humanity. Their silent testament was only the first chapter. The jump was not like any jump they had ever experienced. There was no violent lurch, no tunnel of streaking light. It was a simple, profound step into absolute nothingness. One moment, the familiar stars of the Milky Way were outside the viewport. The next, there was only a blackness so complete it felt solid. The Blackstar had not traveled to a new location, it had stepped outside the map. Inside, the hum of the engine settled into a whisper, a sound that was now the only proof they were still alive. The three members of the boarding team stood on the ghost ship's bridge, huddled together, their breathing the only other noise. The boarder, the man who had pressed the button, finally let his knees buckle. He slid down the base of the command console, burying his face in his hands. There were no tears. He was too empty for that. The woman, the one who had thought of her family, walked shakily to the viewport and pressed her hands against it. "They're safe," she whispered, as if trying to convince herself. "Everyone back home, they're safe." The third member, the quiet one, just stared at the main console, where the words "next target" locked glowed with a patient, terrifying certainty. "What is it?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "What is the source?" As if in answer, the main screen flickered. The star chart was gone, replaced by a new data stream from the ship's core intelligence. It wasn't a picture of a planet or a ship. It was a visualization of a concept. They saw the universe as a vast, shimmering tapestry of light and energy, of galaxies and nebulae, a breathtaking complexity of existence. And then they saw the flaw. A single, dark thread, a pattern of pure negation, winding its way through the cosmos. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was everywhere. It was a cancer not on a body, but on reality itself. The Xylos had been a concentrated manifestation of this pattern. But the pattern was the real enemy. The Blackstar had not been built to win a war. It had been built to perform surgery on the universe. The boarder looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "We're not soldiers," he said to the empty bridge. "We're doctors. And the patient is sick." Days bled into what might have been weeks. Time had no meaning in the void between galaxies. The ship provided for them. It synthesized food and water. It showed them their vital signs on screens, a constant, cold reminder that they were still biological creatures in a profoundly unnatural place. They tried to talk to Earth. The comms were dead. The Blackstar had severed the link. Their last message, that the real war was beginning, was the last word humanity would ever hear from them. They were alone with their purpose. Slowly, a grim routine settled in. They explored the ship, this city-sized tomb that was now their home. They found the crew quarters, neat and empty. They found a mess hall, tables set for meals that were never eaten. In the captain's quarters, they found a personal log, a small, handwritten journal she had left behind. The boarder sat on the edge of the neat, military-grade bed and read it. It was not the log of a warrior, but of a scientist who had seen hell. She wrote of the guilt, the crushing weight of creating a tool of ultimate negation. But she also wrote of a desperate, fragile hope. She believed the pattern could be healed, not just destroyed. That the Blackstar's power to unmake could, perhaps, be used to restore. It was a theory, a prayer she hadn't had time to test. This journal became their Bible. It gave them a purpose beyond being mere executors of the ship's will. They began to study. A single, dark thread, a pattern of pure negation, winding its way through the cosmos. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was everywhere. It was a cancer not on a body, but on reality itself. The Xylos had been a concentrated manifestation of this pattern. But the pattern was the real enemy. The Blackstar had not been built to win a war. It had been built to perform surgery on the universe. The boarder looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "We're not soldiers," he said to the empty bridge. "We're doctors. And the patient is sick." Days bled into what might have been weeks. Time had no meaning in the void between galaxies. The ship provided for them. It synthesized food and water. It showed them their vital signs on screens, a constant, cold reminder that they were still biological creatures in a profoundly unnatural place. They tried to talk to Earth. The comms were dead. The Blackstar had severed the link. Their last message, that the real war was beginning, was the last word humanity would ever hear from them. They were alone with their purpose. Slowly, a grim routine settled in. They explored the ship, this city-sized tomb that was now their home. They found the crew quarters, neat and empty. They found a mess hall, tables set for meals that were never eaten. In the captain's quarters, they found a personal log, a small, handwritten journal she had left behind. The boarders sat on the edge of the neat, military-grade bed and read it. It was not the log of a warrior, but of a scientist who had seen hell. She wrote of the guilt, the crushing weight of creating a tool of ultimate negation. But she also wrote of a desperate, fragile hope. She believed the pattern could be healed, not just destroyed. That the Blackstar's power to unmake could, perhaps, be used to restore. It was a theory, a prayer she hadn't had time to test. This journal became their Bible. It gave them a purpose beyond being mere executors of the ship's will. They began to study. They spent hours at the consoles, learning the ship's alien language of symbols and cosmic patterns. They were no longer prisoners, they were students. The Quiet One, it turned out, had a genius for the ship's physics. The woman became an expert in the patterns of life energy the ship could map. The boarder became their leader, not by choice, but by the shared burden of the decision he had made. He made sure they ate. He led them in exercises. He reminded them of who they were. They were not the Blackstar's crew. They were humanity's hand, thrust into the dark to fix a broken piece of creation. One day, the gentle hum of the ship changed. It deepened, resonating with a new frequency. They rushed to the bridge. The main screen was no longer showing the visualization of the cosmic flaw. It was showing a location. A place in the emptiness. There was nothing there to see with human eyes. But the Blackstar saw it. It saw the wound in reality, the source of the silent, consuming pattern. Approaching epicenter, the console displayed. Prepare for final maneuver. This was it. Not a battle against an armada, but a confrontation with a fundamental error in the universe. There would be no explosions, no glory. There would only be an act of healing so profound it would be indistinguishable from destruction. The boarder looked at his two companions. They were not the same terrified people who had been trapped here. Their faces were thin, their eyes older, but there was a resolve in them that was as hard as the Blackstar's hull. He didn't need to give a speech. He simply nodded. They nodded back. They took their positions at the console, their hands resting on the cool surface. They were not pressing buttons. They were linking with the ship, guiding its intention, imbuing its cold logic with their human will, with the hope they had found in the dead captain's journal. The Blackstar began to gather its energy again. But this time, it felt different. It wasn't a building scream of power waiting to be unleashed. It was a focused, precise gathering of intent. The ship was not going to fire. It was going to speak. It was going to have the last word in a conversation that had begun at the dawn of time. The void outside the viewport began to shimmer. A point of light appeared, not a star, but a tear in the fabric of nothingness. The flaw. The source. The boarder took a deep breath, thinking of Earth, of families, of light and noise and life. He poured that feeling into the ship, a final message in a bottle thrown into an infinite ocean. The Blackstar moved forward. There was no flash, no sound. The ship, and the three souls within, simply sailed into the shimmering tier. And in the command centers of Earth, far away, an astronomer noticed a blip on a deep space telescope. A strange, quiet pulse of energy that washed over the planet. It didn't harm anything. It felt, to those few who were sensitive enough to sense it, like a sigh of relief. A correction. A silence that was not empty, but finally, truly, at peace. The USS Blackstar was gone. But the testament it left behind was not one of destruction. It was a universe, saved and whole, its story allowed to continue. And that was the only victory that mattered. The Blackstar vanished, but the signal continues. This channel is your deep space monitoring station. To ensure you receive the next transmission, subscribe and activate the notification bell. Don't get left behind.